A struggling waiter offered a free meal to a homeless woman, but he never imagined she would change his life forever. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The evening chill seeped through Michael Rivers' thin server uniform as he glanced nervously over his shoulder. The back alley behind Bellini's wasn't exactly a dining area, but it would have to do. He clutched the steaming bowl of minestrone between his calloused hands, savoring the momentary warmth before his nightly ritual. "Coast is clear," he whispered to himself, pushing open the heavy metal door with his hip. In the shadowed alcove beside the restaurant's side entrance, Eleanor Wright sat with her back against the brick wall. At 70, her face mapped a geography of hardship, though her eyes retained a dignity that transcended her circumstances. Her faded green coat had once been elegant, much like Eleanor herself, Michael suspected. "Evening service," Michael said softly, extending the soup. "It's minestrone tonight. Chef added extra veggies." Eleanor's weathered hands emerged from her coat sleeves, accepting the offering with a slight nod. "Thank you, young man. Your kindness doesn't go unnoticed." Michael glanced at his watch, 2 minutes left on his break. "Sorry I can't stay longer. It's Friday rush." Eleanor took a careful sip, closing her eyes momentarily in appreciation. "This will sustain me far beyond nourishment." Something in her precise diction always struck Michael as incongruous with her situation, but tonight he had no time to ponder it. He slipped back through the service entrance, the warmth of the kitchen a stark contrast to the alley's chill. As he hurried to wash his hands at the prep sink, Michael caught a glimpse of himself in the polished stainless steel panel. Dark circles had become permanent fixtures beneath his eyes, making his 25 years look closer to 35. The reflection revealed more than fatigue. It showed a young man running out of rope. "Rivers, Table 7's appetizers are up." Michael turned from the sink, but froze when he saw Chef Gino's gaze fixed not on him, but on the empty soup bowl on the counter. The chef's dark eyes shifted slowly from the bowl to Michael. "That's the third unmarked meal this week," Gino said, his voice deceptively calm. Michael felt his throat tighten. Save it," Gino cut him off. "Finish your shift, then we talk." The remainder of Michael's shift passed in a blur of trays, orders, and forced smiles. During a brief moment of respite, he slipped into the cramped employee locker room and pulled a wrinkled envelope from his jacket pocket. The hospital logo sat like an accusation in the corner, with $3,000 circled in aggressive red ink. His shoulders sagged as he stared at the medical bill. Jessica's treatment had already drained their meager savings, and now the hospital had moved up her next round of chemotherapy. $3,000 might as well be $3 million. During his dinner break, Michael stood at a payphone near the restaurant's back entrance, the receiver pressed tightly against his ear. "Yes, I understand the treatment schedule can't be delayed," he said, pinching the bridge of his nose. "I'll figure something out by Monday." When he hung up, the weight of responsibility settled even heavier on his shoulders. Their parents had been gone for 7 years now, a car accident that had orphaned him at 18 and Jessica at 9. Since then, every decision, every sacrifice had been for her. When her leukemia diagnosis came last year, Michael had abandoned his music studies, taking on 2 jobs to keep them afloat. Back in the dining room, Michael moved methodically between tables, clearing dishes and resetting silverware. Without realizing it, he began to hum softly, a melody he'd composed years ago, before responsibility had silenced his musical aspirations. "That's quite lovely," came a voice behind him. "Beethoven with a touch of Debussy. An interesting combination." Michael turned, startled to find Eleanor standing tentatively just inside the restaurant's entrance. Her hair was combed back, face cleaner than it had been earlier, as if she'd made an effort to look presentable. Before Michael could respond, Gino emerged from the kitchen, his expression darkening at the sight of Eleanor. "Excuse me, ma'am," Gino said firmly, advancing toward her. "We don't allow solicitation in the restaurant." Michael stepped forward quickly. "She's not soliciting, she's a friend of my aunt's. Just came to use the restroom." Gino's skeptical gaze shifted between them. 2 minutes, he warned before returning to the kitchen. Michael ushered Eleanor toward the narrow hallway leading to the restrooms. "That was close," he whispered once they were out of earshot. "Is everything okay?" Eleanor smiled slightly. "The soup was wonderful. I just wanted to use the facilities, if that's truly all right." As Michael stood guard in the hallway, Eleanor asked through the partially open bathroom door, "Who taught you music theory? That melody had some complex harmonic structures." Michael blinked in surprise. "My father was a violinist, but that was a long time ago." "And you?" "I used to play piano. Had to sell it after." He trailed off. Eleanor emerged from the bathroom, her penetrating gaze making Michael feel oddly exposed. The true musicians never stop being musicians, regardless of circumstances. She squeezed his arm gently before heading toward the exit. When Michael returned to his duties, Gino was waiting, ledger in hand. 7 unmarked meals this month, he said, tapping the account book. "That's theft in any restaurant, Rivers. I can explain. You have until closing to come up with something better than homeless friend of your aunt. Otherwise, don't bother coming back tomorrow." The ultimatum hung in the air as Gino walked away. Losing this job would be catastrophic. Michael needed both his restaurant income and his morning shifts at the warehouse to cover Jessica's treatments. Hours later, after the last customers had departed and the floors were mopped, Michael stepped out into the night air. As he locked the service entrance, he spotted Eleanor huddled against the wall, eyes closed in fitful sleep. He hesitated. He should wake her, tell her to find somewhere safer for the night. Instead, he crouched beside her, gently adjusting her coat to better cover her shoulders. As he did so, a worn leather notebook slipped from her bag onto the pavement. Michael picked it up, intending to return it, but it fell open in his hands. The pages contained musical notations, complex arrangements with marginal notes in elegant handwriting. Flipping through, he found signatures at the bottom of several pages. "Thank you for your insights. Leonard Bernstein on one. Your suggestions elevated the piece. Yo-Yo Ma on another." Confused, Michael turned another page, and a small newspaper clipping fluttered out. The yellowed article showed a much younger Eleanor receiving an award, with the caption, "Eleanor Wright, renowned Juilliard professor, accepts Lifetime Achievement Award for excellence in music education." "I wasn't always who you see now." Eleanor's voice startled him. She had awakened and was watching him with clear, intelligent eyes. "You're a music professor?" Michael asked, handing back the notebook. "Was," she corrected, accepting it with dignity. "Life has turns we don't anticipate." Michael helped her to her feet. "I could lose my job for helping you." "And yet you continue," Eleanor observed. "That says something about character, as does talent squandered." She gestured toward him. "We need to talk about your wasted gift, Michael. And I can help you, even from this unlikely place of mine." As Michael returned the notebook to Eleanor, he noticed a faded photograph partially hidden between the pages. A young couple holding instruments, their faces strangely familiar. Michael stared at the photograph, his brow furrowing as he tried to place the familiar faces. "Who are they?" he asked, pointing to the young couple. Eleanor gently took the photo from his hands, her eyes briefly clouding with something unreadable before she tucked it away. "That's a conversation for another time," she said. "What matters now is your music." Before Michael could press further, a distant church bell struck midnight. "I need to go," he said reluctantly. "My sister will worry." "Tomorrow, then," Eleanor replied with unexpected authority. "After your shift. Bring whatever compositions you've been hiding." 2 weeks later, Michael found himself sitting on an overturned milk crate behind Bellini's, watching in fascination as Eleanor's gnarled fingers traced invisible notes across cardboard boxes arranged to mimic a keyboard. The alley had become their unlikely classroom. No, no, Eleanor shook her head. The progression needs tension before resolution. Try the diminished seventh here. She pointed to their makeshift keyboard, humming the suggested chord. Michael nodded, jotting notes in a cheap spiral notebook. These impromptu lessons had already awakened something he'd thought long dead, the musician buried beneath years of responsibility. Your instincts are exceptional, Eleanor said, watching him revise the passage. Few can naturally balance mathematical precision with emotional resonance. Michael shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. What good is talent when it doesn't pay the bills? He pulled a new envelope from his pocket, another hospital notice with an even more alarming figure. Insurance won't cover Jessica's new medication. It's experimental, apparently. Eleanor studied his face, lines of concern deepening around her eyes. The weight you carry would crush most men twice your age. I don't have a choice, Michael replied, checking his watch. His break was nearly over. Speaking of which, as he rose to return to work, his phone vibrated. The caller ID displayed Dr. Martinez. Michael answered quickly, turning away for privacy. Yes, this is Michael Rivers. What? But the current treatment plan... His face paled as he listened. I understand. Yes, I'll come in tomorrow to discuss options. When he ended the call, Eleanor was watching him with quiet concern. Jessica's leukemia isn't responding as expected, he explained, voice hollow. They're talking about bone marrow transplant now. Eleanor reached out, her hand surprisingly steady as she gripped his arm. One step at a time, Michael. First, finish your shift. We'll think more clearly after. The evening crawled by, each minute stretching like an hour. Near closing time, Gino approached Michael, expression grim. Mr. Bellini wants to see you. Office. Now. Michael's stomach dropped. Antonio Bellini, the restaurant's owner, rarely visited, and never to deliver good news. The narrow hallway to the office seemed to lengthen with each step, his footfalls echoing his pounding heart. Inside the small office, Bellini sat behind the desk, a stocky Italian man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and stern eyes that had witnessed decades in the restaurant business. Rivers, Bellini said without preamble. My manager says you've been stealing food. Michael swallowed hard. Sir, It's not theft, came a clear voice from the doorway. It's unauthorized charity, and the blame lies entirely with me. Michael turned in shock to see Eleanor standing in the doorway, transformed. Though still wearing her faded green coat, her silver hair was neatly combed, her face clean, her posture straight, with a dignity that commanded attention. I asked this young man for help, she continued, stepping into the office with surprising authority. If you wish to blame someone, blame me. Bellini's eyes narrowed as he studied her. Do I know you? Eleanor Wright, she replied simply. Eleanor Wright? Bellini leaned forward, recognition dawning. From Juilliard? The tense silence that followed was broken by the sudden appearance of Jessica at the door, her thin frame made more fragile by illness. A knit beanie covered her bare scalp, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. Michael, I forgot my medicine in your locker and... She stopped, sensing the tension. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Michael moved quickly to his sister's side. Jess, what are you doing here? You should be resting. I felt better today, she said, though her pallor contradicted her words. And I was bored at home alone. Bellini's stern expression softened slightly at the sight of the teenager. Your sister? He asked Michael. Yes, sir. The restaurant owner studied the tableau before him, the dedicated brother, the ill teenager, the dignified homeless woman, and sighed deeply. Rivers, take tomorrow off. We'll continue this conversation Monday. He waved his hand in dismissal. Outside the restaurant, Jessica linked her arm through Michael's. "That looked intense. Are you in trouble?" "Nothing for you to worry about," he assured her, forcing a smile. "Let's get you home." As they turned to leave, Eleanor swayed suddenly, her hand reaching for the wall. "Eleanor?" Michael moved quickly to steady her, alarmed by her sudden pallor. "Just a moment of dizziness," she murmured, but her legs buckled beneath her. "Taxi!" Michael shouted, supporting Eleanor's weight while Jessica flagged down a passing cab. The emergency room was crowded, but Eleanor's labored breathing expedited their wait. As she was wheeled away for examination, Michael and Jessica settled into the hard plastic chairs of the waiting area. An hour later, a doctor approached them. "Are you family?" he asked. "Yes," Michael lied without hesitation. The doctor nodded. "She has severe pneumonia. There are other issues as well: chronic malnutrition, untreated cardiac problems. We're admitting her." While the doctor continued explaining Eleanor's condition, Jessica wandered down the corridor, restless from her own too frequent hospital visits. After getting Eleanor settled in a room, Michael went searching for his sister. He found her in a nearby room, sitting beside Eleanor's bed, showing her something on her phone. "And this one Michael wrote when I first got diagnosed," Jessica was saying. "He says the key changes represent the different treatment phases." Eleanor examined the musical notation on the screen. "Your brother should be studying this, not serving tables." "He gave up everything for me," Jessica replied, guilt evident in her voice. Michael cleared his throat from the doorway. "Jess, we should let Eleanor rest." Eleanor's eyes, bright despite her illness, fixed on Michael. "Your sister has been showing me your compositions. You've been holding out on me." Michael shrugged uncomfortably. "Just things I scribble when I can't sleep." "Things you scribble," Eleanor repeated with a weak laugh. "Mozart also just scribbled things." Later that night, after settling Jessica at home with their neighbor, Mrs. Patel, checking in, Michael returned to Bellini's to collect his belongings, assuming he was fired. To his surprise, Mr. Bellini was waiting in the darkened restaurant, nursing an espresso at the bar. "Sir," Michael acknowledged cautiously, "I just came to get my things." "Sit," Bellini commanded, gesturing to the stool beside him. Michael complied, bracing for the dismissal. "I made some calls," Bellini said after a moment. "Found out who she is." He took a sip of espresso. "Eleanor Wright taught my daughter 30 years ago. Piano." He shook his head. "How does someone like that end up on the streets?" The story emerged slowly as Michael explained what little he knew. Eleanor's husband had died, leaving hidden debts. Health problems without insurance had drained her savings. Too proud to ask former colleagues for help, she had gradually slipped through society's cracks. "And now she's teaching you?" Bellini asked. "In a way, she recognized something in me. Music I'd forgotten was there." Bellini nodded thoughtfully, then reached into his jacket pocket and extracted a folded flyer. "This arrived by messenger today. Special audition at Juilliard tomorrow. For exceptional talents without financial resources." Michael accepted the paper, confused. "Why are you giving me this?" "It has your name on it," Bellini replied. "Eleanor arranged it through old contacts, without telling you, apparently." Michael stared at the flyer in disbelief. A Juilliard audition was the dream he'd abandoned years ago when his parents died. "Impossible," he said finally. "Jessica has new tests at the hospital tomorrow. She needs me there." "The choice is yours," Bellini replied, standing to leave. "But Eleanor is using her last strength to keep this door open." As Bellini walked away, he paused at the door. "Tomorrow you will have to choose," he said, pointing to the clock, "between accompanying your sister to the hospital or attending the audition that could completely change your future. And Eleanor is using her last strength to keep that door open." The dawn light filtered through the hospital corridor windows, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Michael paced the narrow hallway, periodically glancing at the clock mounted on the sterile white wall, then back at the audition flyer in his trembling hands. 6 hours until the Juilliard audition. 3 hours until Jessica's new test results. He ran his fingers through his disheveled hair, exhaustion blurring the edges of his vision after a sleepless night. The weight of the decision pressed down on him like a physical force. If he chose Jessica, as he always had, he would miss the opportunity Eleanor had miraculously arranged. If he chose the audition, he risked not being there when his sister needed him most. A harried nurse rushed past, then stopped abruptly and turned back. "Are you Michael Rivers?" she asked, her voice tinged with urgency. Michael nodded, his heart sinking. "Is it Jessica?" "No," the nurse replied. "It's Mrs. Wright. She was transferred to ICU during the night. Her pneumonia has complicated with her weakened heart." Michael followed the nurse through a maze of corridors, each step heavier than the last. Through the glass partition of the ICU, he could see Eleanor, diminished beneath a tangle of tubes and wires, her silver hair splayed against the stark white pillow. "Can I see her?" he asked. "Briefly," the nurse replied. "She's heavily sedated." Inside the room, the rhythmic beeping of monitors created a mechanical symphony far removed from the music Eleanor cherished. Michael approached cautiously, taking her frail hand in his. Her skin felt like parchment, delicate and irreplaceable. "I don't know what to do," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You created this chance for me, but how can I take it?" Eleanor remained still, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Michael sat beside her until a nurse gently touched his shoulder, indicating his time was up. His next stop was Jessica's room, where he found his sister sitting up in bed, scrolling through her phone. Despite the circumstances, she smiled when he entered. "You look terrible," she observed. "Thanks," Michael replied with a forced smile, settling into the chair beside her. "Listen, Jess, about today." "The audition," she interrupted. "Eleanor told me about it yesterday." "I'm not going," Michael said firmly. "Your tests are today, and Eleanor's condition has worsened." Jessica's expression shifted from understanding to determination. "This is exactly why you have to go." "Jess..." "No, Michael." She set her phone down, fixing him with an intense gaze that belied her 16 years. "For 7 years, you've put your life on hold for me. You gave up music school, took jobs you hate, missed every opportunity. I won't let you miss this one." "You're more important," Michael insisted. "And you think I don't know that?" Jessica's voice rose slightly. "That's exactly why I can't be the reason you missed this chance. Eleanor is fighting for her life right now, and she used her remaining connections to get you this audition. Don't waste that." "But your tests will happen whether you're sitting in that uncomfortable chair or playing piano at Juilliard." Jessica reached for his hand. "Mrs. Patel already agreed to come with me. The doctors don't need you here. They need you to follow your dream so that when I beat this cancer, I can brag about my famous brother." Michael felt tears threatening. "Jess, I can't just..." "If you don't go," Jessica interrupted, her voice taking on an unexpected firmness, "I will never forgive you." The siblings stared at each other in silence, years of shared struggles passing unspoken between them. Finally, Michael nodded. "Okay," he whispered. After another hour of planning and reassurances, Michael rushed home to change. The only suitable clothing he owned was the suit he'd worn to his high school graduation, now slightly too small. A quick message to Bellini yielded unexpected support. Not only was the restaurant owner willing to lend Michael a proper suit, but he also offered his driver to ensure timely arrival at the audition. Despite these advantages, New York traffic proved merciless. Michael watched in dismay as the digital clock in the car ticked past the audition's start time. By the time they pulled up to the imposing Juilliard building, he was nearly 30 minutes late, sweat beading on his forehead despite the crisp autumn air. He raced up the steps, Bellini's slightly large suit jacket flapping around him, and burst through the doors to the reception area. The elegant woman behind the desk raised an eyebrow at his disheveled appearance. "I'm here for the special audition," Michael gasped, fumbling for the crumpled flyer in his pocket. The receptionist consulted her computer with deliberate slowness. "That audition is already underway. The committee is seeing the final candidates now." "Please," Michael implored, leaning against the desk. "I need to be heard. I came in the name of Eleanor Wright." The effect of the name was immediate. The receptionist's expression shifted, and she picked up her phone, speaking in low tones. After a brief conversation, she nodded towards a corridor. "Room 307, they'll see you last. And you're late," she added unnecessarily. The walk down the hallway felt like a dream. Michael passed practice rooms where students coaxed extraordinary sounds from various instruments, their faces intent with the concentration of those who had never questioned their right to be there. He felt like an imposter in borrowed clothes, attempting to claim a world that had never been meant for him. Outside room 307, he paused to collect himself. Through the door, he could hear the concluding notes of another audition, a cello piece executed with technical perfection. Taking a deep breath, he knocked. "Enter," called a stern voice. 3 elderly professors sat behind a long table, their expressions a study in academic skepticism. The woman in the center, clearly the committee chair, had silver hair pulled into a severe bun and piercing blue eyes that seemed to catalog Michael's every inadequacy. "You're the last candidate," she observed dryly. "And you're late." "Yes, ma'am, I apologize," Michael replied, approaching the gleaming grand piano at the center of the room. He hadn't touched a formal piano in years. Having practiced only on a small electronic keyboard he'd found at a thrift store for Jessica. He sat on the bench, the smooth ivory keys both familiar and intimidating. His hands hovered uncertainly, trembling slightly. "What will you be playing?" asked the woman. Michael had planned to perform a Chopin piece that Eleanor had been helping him perfect. But as he looked at the piano, at this opportunity born from Eleanor's sacrifice, he made a different decision. "I'll be presenting an original composition," he announced. "It's called The Unexpected Gift." Without waiting for a response, he placed his fingers on the keys. The first few notes came hesitantly, his muscles remembering paths long untraveled. But gradually, as the music began to flow, Michael felt himself disappearing into the composition. It was a piece he hadn't realized he'd been writing in his head for months. A musical narrative of his, Eleanor's, and Jessica's intertwining stories. It began with discord and struggle, the bass notes heavy with the burden of loss and responsibility. Then came a tentative melodic line, representing Eleanor's unexpected entrance into their lives. The piece built, integrating themes of hope and fear, illness and healing, until it crescendoed into a complex interplay of harmonies that somehow maintained their individuality while creating something greater together. As the final notes faded, Michael realized his cheeks were wet. He'd closed his eyes during the performance, and now he opened them to find all 3 evaluators watching him intently. The woman in the center had tears in her eyes. "Where did Eleanor find you?" asked one of the male professors, his voice hushed. Michael smiled faintly. "In truth, I found her. Or perhaps we found each other." The committee chairwoman approached the piano, an envelope in her hand. "Full scholarship, with stipend for expenses," she said without preamble. "Eleanor contacted us weeks ago saying she had found a raw diamond that needed only polishing." Michael accepted the envelope with numb fingers. "I don't understand. You're deciding now, without deliberation?" "Some talents require no deliberation, Mr. Rivers," she replied. "And Eleanor Wright's endorsement carries significant weight, even after her absence from our circles." The euphoria of acceptance carried Michael through the city streets, his feet barely touching the ground as he made his way back to the hospital. The scholarship envelope felt like a talisman in his pocket, a magic ticket to a future he'd abandoned years ago. His elation dampened as he approached Jessica's floor. Dr. Martinez stood in the corridor, her expression grave. "Michael," she greeted him. "I've been trying to reach you." "How's Jessica?" he asked immediately. "And Eleanor?" "Eleanor is in critical condition," Dr. Martinez replied. "And Jessica needs to start the new protocol immediately. The test results confirmed our concerns. Her current treatment isn't sufficient." Reality crashed back with crushing force. "How am I going to pay for this?" Michael asked, the scholarship envelope suddenly seeming inconsequential against the mountain of medical needs. "Jessica's treatment is already covered," Dr. Martinez said, consulting her tablet. "An anonymous donation was made this morning, specifically designated for her case." Michael froze. "Anonymous, how much?" "Enough for the complete protocol, including follow-up care." Dr. Martinez looked up. "It's highly unusual, but the hospital has verified the funds." Michael's thoughts immediately went to Eleanor. But how could a homeless woman arrange such a donation? Before he could process this new development, he had to see her. He hurried to Eleanor's room in the ICU, only to find a nurse removing the sheets from an empty bed. "Where is she?" he asked, heart plummeting. "Am I too late?" "She's been transferred to palliative care," the nurse explained gently. "Her condition stabilized enough to move her, but she left the prognosis unspoken. She left this for you." The nurse handed Michael a yellowed envelope. Inside was an old photograph, two young musicians smiling broadly beside a younger Eleanor. Michael recognized them instantly, his parents. His hands trembled as he unfolded the letter that accompanied the photo, while the first words leapt from the page. "Your father was my most brilliant student, and what happened that night should never have been hidden from you." Michael's hands shook as he continued reading Eleanor's letter, his world tilting on its axis with each revelation. "Your father was my most brilliant student, and what happened that night should never have been hidden from you. When he and your mother died in the accident, I searched for you and Jessica, but you were already under state care. I lost track of you both. Years later, when you found me at the restaurant, it wasn't coincidence. It was destiny completing a circle." Michael leaned against the wall, sliding down until he sat on the cold hospital floor. The photograph trembled in his grip, his parents, young and radiant, instruments in hand, standing proudly beside Eleanor. His father's smile, so like Jessica's. His mother's eyes, which Michael saw in the mirror every day. "Michael?" He looked up to find Jessica standing in the hallway, supporting herself with a walker, her face flushed with exertion. "You shouldn't be walking around," he said automatically, quickly wiping his eyes. "She saved us," Jessica said, ignoring his concern. She held out a folder of documents. "Eleanor sold the rights to her unpublished compositions this morning. There's a contract here. The money is for my treatment and your education fund." Michael took the folder, incredulous. How did she arrange this so quickly? "Mr. Bellini," Jessica explained, lowering herself carefully to sit beside him. "He's more than just a restaurant owner. He's one of the main patrons of Juilliard's music department." Michael flipped through the legal papers, his vision blurring at the figures. Enough to cover Jessica's treatment completely, enough for his living expenses while at Juilliard. "I don't understand," he whispered. "Why would she do all this for us?" Jessica leaned her head against his shoulder. "She knew Mom and Dad, Michael. She's been looking for us for years." Over the next few days, Michael established a new routine. Mornings at Juilliard, where he attended introductory sessions for scholarship recipients. Afternoons at Jessica's bedside, where her new treatment was already showing promising results. Evenings beside Eleanor, whose condition remained critical but stable. The first classes at Juilliard filled Michael with equal parts exhilaration and terror. The campus was alive with talent, students who had been groomed for musical careers since childhood, whose hands had never known dishwater or warehouse boxes. Yet when Michael sat at a piano in one of the practice rooms, something elemental connected him to the instrument, as if the years of absence had only intensified their relationship. "Your technique needs refinement, but your emotional interpretation is extraordinary," his new advisor commented after hearing him play. "Eleanor was right about you." In the hospital, Jessica's room had transformed. The walls now displayed colorful charts tracking her blood counts, which showed gradual improvement. A small electronic keyboard sat by her bed, a gift from Michael's new classmates who'd heard his story. "The new meds make me feel weird," Jessica admitted one afternoon, as Michael helped her through simple scales. "But Dr. Martinez says my numbers are heading in the right direction." "That's what matters," Michael assured her, adjusting her fingers on the keys. "Just focus on getting stronger." During his evening visits to Eleanor, Michael would sit quietly beside her bed, sometimes reading aloud from music theory texts, sometimes simply holding her papery hand in his. The doctors had been clear. Her systems were failing progressively. It was only a matter of time. On the fifth evening, Michael arrived to find Eleanor's eyes open, watching the sunset through her window. "You're awake," he said softly, taking his usual chair beside her. "Intermittently," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "How is Jessica responding to the new treatment?" "Better than expected. Her oncologist is cautiously optimistic." Eleanor nodded slightly. "And your classes?" "Overwhelming," Michael admitted, "but in the best possible way. I had forgotten what it feels like to be challenged like this." "I knew you belonged there," Eleanor said. Her hand moved feebly toward a cup of water. Michael helped her take a small sip before continuing. "I don't understand why you did all this for us," he said. The question that had been haunting him for days. Eleanor's eyes, though clouded with medication, fixed on him with surprising intensity. "Because music should never die," she answered. "And because I promised your parents long ago that I would look after you if anything happened. How did you find us after all these years?" A ghost of a smile touched Eleanor's lips. "I didn't. You found me. When you gave me that first bowl of soup months ago, I didn't recognize you. It was only when I heard you humming your father's favorite progression pattern that something clicked. You play exactly like him, technically imperfect but emotionally pure." "I've been angry at them for so long," Michael confessed, "for leaving us, for dying." Eleanor's fingers tightened slightly around his. "Your father was working on something important the night they died. Something that might have changed everything for your family. But that's a conversation for when I'm stronger." 3 months passed in a blur of hospital rooms, practice sessions, and new beginnings. The harsh winter softened into early spring, bringing with it fragile hope. Jessica's treatment continued to show results. The cancer was retreating, though the battle was far from over. Michael had settled into his studies at Juilliard, his initial insecurity giving way to determined focus as he caught up on years of missed training. And Eleanor, defying medical expectations, had stabilized. Though still weak and confined mostly to her bed, she had been moved to a long-term care facility adjacent to the hospital. Every other day, Michael would wheel her into the garden when weather permitted, or to the facility's small common room where a donated upright piano stood. It was during one of these sessions that Michael proposed his idea. "I want to organize a concert," he explained as Eleanor listened intently. "Here, in the hospital courtyard, for the patients, the staff, everyone. My classmates have agreed to perform." "A healing concert," Eleanor mused. "Music is medicine. Your father would approve." With Bellini's financial backing and Eleanor's guidance from her wheelchair, Michael's vision took shape. The hospital's internal courtyard was transformed with a small stage, chairs arranged in concentric circles, and sound equipment borrowed from Juilliard. Patients who couldn't leave their beds would be able to listen through the hospital's intercom system. The day of the concert arrived with perfect spring weather, sunshine filtering through new leaves, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of flowering trees. Michael stood backstage, nervously adjusting his borrowed suit as he watched the courtyard fill. Patients in wheelchairs and gurneys occupied the front rows, many with IV poles at their sides. Hospital staff in scrubs and lab coats stood along the periphery. In the front row, Jessica sat proudly, her thin hair beginning to regrow in wispy patches. The healthy flush in her cheeks was worth more than any standing ovation Michael could ever receive. Beside her, Eleanor observed everything with evident pride, fragile but present, her silver hair arranged neatly and a hint of color on her lips. Taking a deep breath, Michael stepped onto the stage and approached the microphone. "Welcome to the first healing concert at Memorial Hospital," he announced, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "This performance is dedicated to two women who taught me that family isn't just who shares our blood, but who shares our soul." As he moved to the piano and began to play, Michael felt a strange sense of completion. The music flowed through him, no longer just his own expression, but a channel connecting everyone present. He played an original composition that told their story: the loss, the struggle, the unexpected connection, and the hope that had emerged from despair. Behind the scenes, Mr. Bellini discreetly signed documents that would transform these concerts into a permanent program, funded by his foundation. The hospital administrator beside him nodded in satisfaction as he reviewed the terms, both men watching the rapt audience. When the last notes faded and applause filled the courtyard, Michael found himself surrounded by his Juilliard classmates who had performed alongside him. A string quartet, a flautist, two vocalists. Together they took a bow, but Michael's eyes sought only Jessica and Eleanor. As he approached them after the performance, Eleanor reached into a small bag on her lap and withdrew a small gold brooch, a treble clef with a tiny pearl. "Your father wore this for every performance," she explained, pinning it to Michael's shirt. "It was his good luck charm." "I found my own luck," Michael replied, looking between Jessica and Eleanor, "and the true meaning of home." Eleanor smiled, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Do you know what the most beautiful part of music is, Michael?" "What?" "The silence between the notes. That's where the magic lives." She squeezed his hand. "Like fate in the pauses between our meetings." Later that evening, as Michael helped Eleanor back to her room, she handed him a small thumb drive. "I've been recording some memories," she explained, "about your parents, about their work, things you should know." "Thank you," Michael said, pocketing the drive, "for everything." Eleanor's expression turned serious. "There's something else you should know. Your father's work, it wasn't just music. He discovered something that powerful people wanted to remain hidden. That's why I've been cautious about sharing too much too quickly." "What are you saying?" Michael asked, a chill running down his spine. "That accident." Eleanor's voice dropped to a whisper. "I've never believed it was truly an accident." Before Michael could press for more details, a nurse arrived to help Eleanor prepare for bed. He kissed her cheek gently and promised to return tomorrow. As he walked through the hospital corridors, Michael's mind raced with questions. If his parents' death wasn't an accident, what did that mean? And why had Eleanor kept this from him until now? His phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "I watched your performance from afar. You don't know me, but I've known you since you were born. We need to talk about your parents." Michael stared at his phone, the message from the unknown number sending a chill through his body. His thumb hovered over the reply button, uncertain how to respond to someone who claimed to have known him since birth. After several attempts at composing a message, he finally typed, "Where and when?" The response came almost immediately. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Riverside Cafe on 82nd Street. Look for the man with a blue Jazz Festival pin." Michael slipped the phone into his pocket and continued walking, his mind filled with questions. The spring evening air felt electric with possibility and danger in equal measure. First Eleanor's revelations about his parents' accident, and now this mysterious contact. After years of focusing solely on survival, the past was suddenly rushing back with unexpected force. The following afternoon, Michael arrived at Riverside Cafe 15 minutes early, selecting a table with a clear view of the entrance. The cozy space hummed with quiet conversation and the gentle clinking of cups. Each time the door opened, Michael's heart rate spiked, his eyes searching for the blue pin. At precisely 2 o'clock, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and tired eyes entered. He scanned the room methodically until his gaze found Michael. The small blue Jazz Festival pin glinted on his weathered leather jacket. "Michael Rivers," the man said as he approached, not a question but a confirmation. "You look like him. Same eyes, same way of holding yourself." "And you are?" Michael asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. "Robert Caldwell." The man sat down, placing a manila folder on the table between them. "I played with your father's quartet for 8 years, second violin to his first." Michael studied Robert's face, searching for any hint of deception. "Why contact me now? It's been 7 years since the accident." Robert's expression darkened. "Because it wasn't an accident, and because I only recently discovered you were in New York." He opened the folder and extracted a faded photograph, sliding it across the table. "Your father's quartet, plus our sound engineer. That's me on the left, your dad in the center." The photo showed 5 people, arms around each other's shoulders, instruments in hand. Michael recognized his father immediately. The same gentle eyes, the same slight tilt of the head that Jessica had inherited. "What do you mean it wasn't an accident?" Michael asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. Robert leaned forward. "Those brake lines didn't fail naturally. Your father was working on something the night they died. Something that would have exposed significant wrongdoing at Stellar Records." "Wrongdoing," Michael repeated, his mind racing. "Intellectual property theft on a massive scale," Robert explained. "Your father discovered evidence that certain executives were stealing compositions from unsigned artists, making minor changes, then publishing them under established names for bigger profits." Michael shook his head, trying to process this information. "But why kill him over music?" "Because we're talking about millions in royalties and reputation. The people involved are powerful figures in the industry." As Robert continued explaining, Michael's phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Doctor says my counts look amazing today. When are you visiting?" The stark contrast between his present reality and this emerging past left Michael feeling untethered. He excused himself to use the restroom, needing a moment to steady his thoughts. When he returned to the table, he had made a decision. "I need to think about all this, but right now, my sister needs me." Robert nodded in understanding. "Your father always said family comes first. That's why he was going to blow the whistle. He wanted to secure your future." He handed Michael a business card. "When you're ready to talk more, call me." 2 hours later, Michael walked through the bright corridors of Memorial Hospital, passing children in various stages of treatment. Some played in the recreation area, others were being pushed in wheelchairs by nurses. Their resilience in the face of illness always humbled him. He found Eleanor sitting by the window in her room, sunlight illuminating her silver hair. Though still frail, she looked stronger than she had in months, carefully writing in her composition notebook. "You look better today," Michael observed, setting down a small bag of her favorite tea cookies. "The spring air agrees with me," Eleanor replied, closing her notebook, "and your success is the best medicine." Before Michael could respond, his phone rang. Dr. Martinez. His stomach dropped as he answered. "Michael, you need to come to Jessica's floor immediately," the the doctor said without preamble. She's developed a severe infection. Her fever spiked suddenly about 20 minutes ago. Michael raced to Jessica's room, fear clawing at his throat. He found his sister surrounded by medical staff, her face flushed with fever, as additional equipment was being wheeled in. "What happened?" he demanded, watching helplessly as nurses hung new IV bags. "Opportunistic infection," Dr. Martinez explained, her expression grave. "Her immune system is still compromised from the treatment. We're starting broad-spectrum antibiotics, but the next 24 hours will be critical." Michael stayed by Jessica's side throughout the evening, watching her restless sleep, the monitors beeping a constant reminder of her fragility. To distract himself from worry, he played quietly on the small keyboard that had been left in her room, improvising gentle melodies that seemed to calm her breathing. Around midnight, a nurse suggested he take a break. "There's a piano in the recreation room," she offered. "Sometimes music helps more than just the patients." The recreation room was empty at this hour. Michael sat at the upright piano and began to play, pouring his anxiety and fear into the keys. He didn't notice the small audience that gradually gathered: night shift nurses, an orderly, a few patients who couldn't sleep. "That was beautiful," said a voice when he finally stopped. Michael looked up to see Mr. Bellini standing in the doorway. "I didn't expect to see you here so late," Michael said, surprised. Bellini approached, his normally stern face softened with concern. "I came as soon as I heard about Jessica. How is she?" "Fighting," Michael replied simply. Bellini nodded, then changed the subject. "I've been speaking with the hospital administrator. They're interested in expanding the concert series to other hospitals in the network, a regular program of healing through music." Despite his worry, Michael felt a spark of interest. "Really? With you as the artistic director, if you're willing. Paid position, of course. It wouldn't interfere with your studies." The offer was unexpected but felt right, a way to use his music to help others facing the same battles Jessica fought daily. "I'd be honored," Michael said, "though right now I can't think beyond Jessica's recovery." "Of course," Bellini agreed. "Family first, always." The phrase echoed what Robert had said about Michael's father, creating an uncomfortable resonance. After Bellini left, Michael found himself drawn to the hospital library, where public computers offered internet access. With determined focus, he searched for information about his parents' accident. Most results were brief news reports. Local musicians die in highway tragedy, brake failure cited in fatal crash. One archived article included a grainy photo of the accident scene, with details that suddenly seemed suspicious in light of Robert's claims. The article mentioned unusual damage patterns consistent with catastrophic brake failure, but nothing about an investigation into possible tampering. Michael printed the page, folding it carefully into his pocket as he headed back to Jessica's room. By morning, Jessica's condition had stabilized somewhat, though she remained feverish. Michael dozed in the uncomfortable chair beside her bed, waking when Eleanor was wheeled in by an aide. "I heard about the infection," Eleanor said, reaching for Jessica's hand. "She's strong, Michael, like her father." Michael rubbed his tired eyes. "I met Robert Caldwell yesterday. He played with my father." Eleanor's expression turned cautious. "What did he tell you?" "That the accident wasn't an accident. That Dad discovered something about Stellar Records stealing compositions." Eleanor sighed deeply. "I was going to tell you when you were ready, when Jessica was stronger." "Why wait? Why keep this from me for so long?" "Protection," Eleanor said simply. "The people involved are still in positions of power. I was trying to shield you both until I could ensure your safety." From her bag, Eleanor withdrew an old, worn leather folder. "These are your father's original compositions. I've kept them safe all these years." Michael accepted the folder reverently, his fingers tracing the worn edges where his father's hands had once rested. Inside were dozens of handwritten scores, some complete, others fragmentary sketches. Among them, a piece titled Unfinished Symphony caught his attention, the margins filled with peculiar notations unlike anything else in the collection. "This one is different," Michael observed, studying the strange markings. "He was working on it the night he died," Eleanor explained, her voice dropping. "I've always suspected it contained more than just music." Later that evening, as Jessica rested more comfortably, her fever finally responding to the antibiotics, Michael sat in the common room playing the mysterious composition. As his fingers translated the notes from page to reality, he began to notice a pattern, a mathematical precision underlying the apparent creative chaos. "That's beautiful," said a voice behind him. Michael turned to see Jessica's nurse, Emily, listening appreciatively. "But so sad." "It was my father's last work," Michael explained. "I'm trying to understand it." As he continued playing, the pattern became clearer. The notes, when viewed through Eleanor's theory of musical encoding, seemed to form letters, numbers, a message hidden within the harmonies. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He sat in the hospital cafeteria, spreading the sheets of music across the table, transcribing the patterns he'd identified. By dawn, he had extracted what appeared to be a series of dates and initials, along with a recurring name, VM. When he showed his findings to Eleanor later that morning, her face paled. "Victor Mercer," she whispered, "the executive producer at Stellar Records. Your father was building a case against him specifically." As Michael processed this information, his phone vibrated, with an incoming call from the unknown number. As he hesitantly answered, a deep voice said, "Stop asking questions about Stellar Records and Victor Mercer, or your little sister might suffer a much more serious relapse than a simple infection." Michael sat beside Eleanor, his hands gripping the unfinished composition, his voice barely above a whisper. "What discovery? What did he know about the record label?" Eleanor's eyes darted toward the door before she answered. "Your father found evidence of systematic fraud. Stellar Records was stealing compositions from unknown musicians, making minor alterations, then publishing them under established names." "That's what Robert Caldwell told me," Michael said. "But why would someone kill over music?" "Because it wasn't just about the music," Eleanor replied, her frail fingers tightening around Michael's. "It was about millions in royalties, reputations of industry titans, and decades of deception. Your father discovered a pattern going back 30 years. Michael ran his hand through his hair, feeling the weight of this revelation. His parents hadn't simply died, they had been silenced. The knowledge burned in his chest, a smoldering coal of anger he'd never allowed himself to feel. His phone chimed with a message from the hospital. He opened it immediately, his breath catching until he read the content. Jessica's latest blood test showed significant improvement. The infection was responding to treatment. "Good news?" Eleanor asked, noting his expression. "Jessica's doing better," he nodded, pocketing his phone. "The new antibiotics are working." Eleanor smiled. "She's stronger than anyone gives her credit for, just like you." Michael spent the afternoon in Jessica's room, watching color gradually return to her cheeks as she slept. The threat he'd received echoed in his mind, each beep of the medical monitors a reminder of her vulnerability. How could he pursue the truth without putting her at risk? "You look like you're solving differential equations in your head," Jessica murmured, her eyes fluttering open. Michael smiled, squeezing her hand. "Just thinking. How are you feeling?" "Less like I've been hit by a truck," she replied with a weak smile. "More like just a small car." "Progress," Michael chuckled. "Dr. Martinez says your numbers are improving." Jessica nodded, then studied his face carefully. "Something's bothering you. Eleanor told me about Mom and Dad, that it might not have been an accident." Michael sighed. "You should be focusing on getting better, not worrying about—" "I'm not a child anymore, Michael," Jessica interrupted with surprising firmness. "I deserve to know the truth about our parents, too." Before Michael could respond, His phone vibrated with a message from Juilliard. The final planning meeting for the upcoming benefit concert was starting in an hour. With Jessica's condition stabilizing, he had decided to move forward with the performance, which would now raise funds specifically for pediatric cancer treatment. "I have to go to a meeting at school," he told Jessica. "We'll talk more when I get back, I promise." The rehearsal room at Juilliard hummed with activity as Michael arrived. Fellow students were arranging chairs, testing sound equipment, and reviewing scores. Professor Winters, the department chair who had been impressed by Michael's audition, beckoned him over. "Rivers, I'd like you to meet Sophia Chen," he said, gesturing to a young woman tuning a violin. "She's agreed to perform the Mendelssohn with you." Sophia looked up, her curly black hair framing an intelligent face with striking green eyes. "I loved your piece at the hospital concert," she said, extending her hand. "The harmonic structure was revolutionary." "Thanks," Michael replied, shaking her hand. "I'm still learning." "Aren't we all?" She smiled. "Professor Winters says you've composed a new piece for this concert?" "Still working on it," Michael admitted. "It's based on some of my father's unfinished work." As the meeting progressed, Michael found himself repeatedly glancing at Sophia. There was something compelling about her focused intensity. The way her fingers danced across the violin strings during short demonstrations, producing tones of astonishing clarity. When the group dispersed to practice in smaller ensembles, Sophia approached him. "Want to run through the Mendelssohn?" They claimed a small practice room, and as they began to play, Michael felt an immediate connection. Their musical instincts complemented each other perfectly. When he leaned into a phrase, she followed intuitively. When she took the lead, he supported with precisely the right touch. That was... Sophia paused after they finished the first movement. "I know." Michael nodded. Something special had happened. A musical conversation that transcended ordinary performance. After practice, as they packed up their instruments, Michael hesitated, then asked, "What do you know about musical coding? Hiding messages in compositions?" Sophia's eyebrows raised. "Like Bach hiding his name in his work using BACH notes, or more complex systems?" "More complex. My father was working on a piece that seems to contain hidden information." Sophia's expression shifted from curiosity to excitement. "I've actually studied musical cryptography. My undergraduate thesis was on Cold War-era communication through cultural exchanges." Michael stared at her in disbelief. "Seriously?" "The universe has strange timing," she smiled. "Show me what you're working on." That evening, after checking on Jessica again, Michael returned to Juilliard with his father's compositions. He found Sophia waiting in a basement practice room, surrounded by music theory texts she'd pulled from the library. "Sorry for the mess," she said, clearing space on a table. "I got excited and went down a research rabbit hole." Michael spread out his father's unfinished symphony. This is what he was working on before he died. The margins have these notations that don't relate to performance directions. Sophia leaned forward, studying the manuscript with practiced eyes. "These aren't random," she confirmed. "There's a pattern here." For hours they worked side by side, identifying recurring symbols, testing theories, occasionally playing sections to hear patterns that might not be visible on paper. Around midnight, Sophia brought them coffee from a vending machine. "Tell me about your father," she said as they took a break. "What kind of musician was he?" "Brilliant but unconventional," Michael replied. "He believed music should be both mathematically perfect and emotionally raw. He could have had a major orchestral career, but he preferred composing and teaching." "Like father, like son," Sophia observed. Michael smiled sadly. "I spent years being angry at him for dying, for leaving us. Now I'm learning he might have died because he was trying to do the right thing." The next morning they were joined by Robert Caldwell, who brought a journal from his days with Michael's father. "We used to develop code systems for fun," he explained. Tour bus games to pass the time. This might help decipher his method. With Robert's insights, they made faster progress. By afternoon, patterns began to emerge. Dates, initials, catalog numbers of recordings. "Look at this," Sophia said suddenly, pointing to a sequence in the second movement. "When we transpose these notes to their alphabetical equivalents, they spell out MERCER, Michael finished, the name sending a chill through him. As their work continued, Mr. Bellini arrived with unexpected news. "I've secured Symphony Hall for the benefit concert, 3 times the capacity of our original venue." "Symphony Hall?" Michael echoed, stunned. "That's appropriate for the cause," Bellini finished firmly. "The ticket sales are already strong. Local media will cover the event." While Michael discussed logistics with Bellini, Sophia continued analyzing the musical code. When Bellini departed, she called him over excitedly. "Michael, I think I've found something. These recurring patterns, they're not just names, they're locations and dates. Look here." She pointed to a sequence that, when decoded, revealed Studio B, January 12th, 1994, Master Tape 394. That must be evidence, Michael realized. Records of the original compositions before they were stolen. As they continued decoding, more pieces fell into place. The symphony contained a comprehensive map of intellectual property theft spanning decades. Names, dates, original recordings, and the altered versions that had been commercially released. That evening, Michael visited Jessica again, finding her sitting up in bed, sketching a poster design for the concert. Eleanor sat beside her, offering suggestions. "You two look conspiratorial," Michael observed, kissing Jessica's forehead. "Eleanor's been teaching me about concert promotion," Jessica explained. "Did you know she used to organize the Young Artists series at Juilliard?" "There's much you don't know about me," Eleanor winked. "How's the concert planning coming along?" "Symphony Hall," Michael announced. Bellini pulled some strings. "Impressive," Eleanor nodded. "And your father's composition? Any progress?" Michael shared their discoveries, careful to keep his voice low despite the private room. As he explained, Eleanor's expression grew increasingly troubled. "Victor Mercer is still powerful," she cautioned. "Even retired, he has connections throughout the industry. But with this evidence from a decades-old composition," Eleanor shook her head. "You need more, Michael. Something concrete that can't be dismissed." Later that night, Michael and Sophia worked frantically in the practice room, surrounded by papers and books on music theory. They had been at it for hours, both too engrossed to notice the time. "Wait," Sophia said suddenly. "These notes here, they don't fit the pattern we've been following." Michael examined the passage she indicated. "You're right. It's almost like he switched to a different code." Sophia grabbed a music theory textbook, flipping to a chapter on a tonal composition. "What if we apply the 12-tone technique as a cipher?" She quickly transposed the notes, writing out the resulting letters. "It's giving us letters, but they're not forming words." "Maybe it's not English," Michael suggested. "My father spoke German and Italian." They tried different language combinations until Sophia had a sudden realization. "Not languages, note names. If we treat these as solfege syllables and convert them back to letters..." She worked quickly, her eyes widening as the message emerged. "Michael, look at this." The decoded message read, "Vault B, safety deposit, Naron 1742, First National, Manhattan." "A safety deposit box," Michael breathed. He left evidence in a safety deposit box. As the full significance of their discovery sank in, Sophia threw her arms around Michael in excitement. The sudden proximity brought them both to a momentary standstill, their faces inches apart. For a fleeting second, the investigation, the concert, everything faded into the background. Then, equally suddenly, they separated, both returning to the papers with renewed focus, though a subtle shift had occurred between them. By dawn, they had decoded most of the composition. What emerged was a meticulous documentation system, each musical phrase pointing to specific evidence of theft, including the safety deposit box that presumably contained physical proof. As Michael prepared to leave for the hospital to check on Jessica, his phone rang with an unknown number. He hesitated before answering hesitantly, and a grave voice said, "Stop digging into Stellar Records and Victor Mercer, or your little sister might have a relapse much more serious than a simple infection." Michael felt the blood drain from his face as the caller's words registered. His hand tightened around the phone, knuckles whitening. "Who is this?" he demanded, but the line had already gone dead. He stood frozen in the hospital corridor, the threat echoing in his mind. The casual mention of Jessica's simple infection confirmed his worst fears. Whoever had called was not only monitoring his activities, but also had information about Jessica's condition. The coincidental timing of her infection suddenly seemed anything but coincidental. Heart hammering in his chest, Michael sprinted down the hallway toward Jessica's room. His footsteps echoed against the sterile walls as nurses and visitors turned to stare at his desperate dash. He rounded the corner, nearly colliding with an orderly pushing a medication cart. At Jessica's door, he paused, forcing himself to take a deep breath before entering. She was sleeping peacefully, her chest rising and falling in a regular rhythm. The monitors displayed improved vital signs, and the fever that had spiked so dramatically had subsided to nearly normal levels. Michael collapsed into the chair beside her bed, watching the steady drip of antibiotics into her IV line. After several minutes of confirming that she was indeed stable, he stepped outside and called Bellini. "I need to speak with you immediately," Michael said, his voice low and urgent. "It's about Jessica's safety." An hour later, Bellini arrived at the hospital, his normally stern expression even more grave. They spoke in hushed tones in a vacant consultation room. "Someone threatened Jessica," Michael explained, recounting the phone call. "They know about her infection, her treatment. They're warning me to stop investigating my parents' accident." Bellini's eyes narrowed. "You believe the infection was deliberate?" "I don't know. It's possible." The thought made Michael's stomach churn. But even if it wasn't, the threat against her was explicit. Bellini nodded thoughtfully. "I have connections in private security. We can arrange discreet protection for Jessica without alarming her." "Thank you," Michael said, relief washing over him. "But there's more. I need to access a safety deposit box my father left. It may contain evidence about Stellar Records and Victor Mercer." "The bank will require proper documentation. Proof that you're authorized," Bellini warned. "I know. I'm hoping Eleanor might have something that could help." Bellini studied Michael's face. "You understand that pursuing this puts you at risk as well?" "My sister's already at risk," Michael replied firmly. "The best protection now is exposing the truth." The next few days passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Jessica continued to improve, unaware of the security detail Bellini had arranged, nurses and orderlies who were actually trained professionals watching over her around the clock. Eleanor had provided a letter from Michael's father, naming her as trustee for his children, which might help with accessing the safety deposit box. Meanwhile, preparations for the benefit concert intensified. The symphony hall arrangements required additional rehearsals, sound checks, and promotional events. Michael threw himself into the work, finding that immersion in music provided temporary respite from his fears. The day before the concert, Michael stood on the symphony hall stage, marveling at the vast space soon to be filled with people supporting pediatric cancer treatment. Technicians adjusted lighting rigs while volunteers arranged program booklets on seats. "It's really happening," Sophia said, joining him on stage. She'd become not just his musical partner, but a crucial ally in the investigation. "Thanks to you and Bellini," Michael acknowledged. "I couldn't have managed this alone." "You're not alone anymore," she replied simply. Their rehearsal that afternoon was their best yet. The Mendelssohn flowed between them with seemingly telepathic communication, and Michael's original composition, incorporating elements of his father's unfinished work, had evolved into something powerful and evocative. As they finished the final run-through, the scattered audience of staff and volunteers erupted in spontaneous applause. "That was extraordinary," Professor Winters commented, approaching the stage. "Ms. Chen, your interpretation complemented Mr. Rivers' composition beautifully." "The piece does the work," Sophia demurred. "We're just the conduits." Later, as they packed up their instruments, Robert Caldwell arrived with an old leather-bound journal. "I found another of your father's notebooks," he explained. "It contains more details about the evidence he was gathering." The three huddled around a backstage table, flipping through pages of coded notes. "He was meticulous," Robert observed, "documenting every instance of theft, tracking payments, identifying original composers who were never credited." "But how did he discover this in the first place?" Michael wondered. Robert's expression darkened. "He was approached to participate. They wanted him to put his name on a composition stolen from a young immigrant composer who couldn't fight back. When he refused, he became a threat." Michael absorbed this information, pride in his father mingling with renewed grief. "The concert tomorrow," Sophia said hesitantly. "It's the perfect opportunity to make this public, with media present, influential donors, even industry people. Also the perfect opportunity for whoever threatened Jessica to act again," Michael pointed out. "Unless we control the narrative," Robert suggested. "Use the public nature of the event as protection." They discussed various approaches until late into the evening, finally developing a plan that balanced public exposure with personal safety. When Michael returned to the hospital that night, he found Jessica awake and drawing. "Tomorrow's the big day," she said excitedly. "Dr. Martinez says I can attend if my counts stay stable and I use a mask and wheelchair." Michael felt a surge of conflicting emotions, joy at having Jessica present, terror at the potential risk. "That's great," he managed, knowing how important it was to her. "Bellini's sending a special car for you and Eleanor." Jessica set aside her sketchpad. "I know something's wrong, Michael. You've been acting strange for days. Is it about Mom and Dad?" Michael hesitated, then decided she deserved partial truth. "Yes. I've discovered some things about their accident that raise questions. But tomorrow should be about the music, about helping kids like you." Jessica studied him with eyes too wise for her years. "Just promise you'll be careful. Whatever you're doing, whatever you've discovered, I can't lose you too." Her words stabbed at his heart. "I promise." That night, Michael could barely sleep, his mind cycling through countless scenarios of what might happen at the concert. By dawn, he'd settled on a modified approach, one that would expose Mercer's crimes while minimizing immediate risk to Jessica. The symphony hall filled rapidly that evening. Michael peeked through the curtain, scanning the audience. Patients from the hospital occupied a special section near the front, Jessica among them, with Eleanor beside her in a wheelchair. Bellini's security people were strategically positioned throughout the hall. Reporters from local media set up cameras at the back. And there, in the third-row center, sat an elderly man in an expensive suit, Victor Mercer himself, his white hair immaculately styled, his expression one of cultured appreciation. The sight of him sent a wave of cold anger through Michael. This man had likely ordered his parents' deaths, and now had the audacity to attend their son's concert. "He came," Michael whispered to Sophia, who stood ready with her violin. "As we expected," she nodded. "Are you still sure about this?" Michael took a deep breath. "Absolutely." The concert began with performances by Michael's classmates, a string quartet, a soprano soloist, a classical guitarist. Each piece was dedicated to a child currently undergoing cancer treatment. Their stories briefly shared between performances. The audience responded with generous applause and visible emotion. During intermission, Michael and Sophia prepared for the second half, which would feature their Mendelssohn duet, followed by Michael's original composition, the piece that would incorporate his father's coded work. "Everything's ready," Robert confirmed, joining them backstage. "The sound engineer has the recording queued up." Michael nodded, feeling strangely calm now that the moment was approaching. "Let's make sure Jessica and Eleanor are protected first." Bellini appeared, his usual stoic expression replaced by concern. "Two of Mercer's people are moving around the periphery of the hall. They're not just enjoying the music." "Stick to the plan," Michael instructed. "As soon as we begin the final piece, have your people move Jessica and Eleanor to the secure room we prepared." When the lights dimmed for the second half, Michael and Sophia took the stage to enthusiastic applause. Their Mendelssohn performance flowed with emotional intensity, drawing a standing ovation. Michael then moved to the microphone. "Our final piece tonight is very personal," he explained. "It incorporates work my father was creating before his death 7 years ago. Music has the power to heal, but also the power to reveal truth. This piece is called Unfinished Justice." As they began to play, Michael scanned the audience, confirming that Bellini's people were discreetly escorting Jessica and Eleanor toward the side exit. Mercer remained in his seat, watching with narrowed eyes as the composition unfolded, initially beautiful, then gradually introducing dissonant elements that created tension and unease. Halfway through the piece, Michael nodded to the sound engineer. The music faded slightly as a recorded voice, his father's voice, preserved on a cassette Eleanor had safeguarded, played through the hall's speakers. "This serves as my testimony regarding systematic intellectual property theft at Stellar Records, overseen by Victor Mercer." Gasps rippled through the audience. Mercer stood abruptly, gesturing to his companions. Michael continued playing as his father's voice detailed specific instances of theft, complete with dates and names. The hall erupted in confused murmurs. Reporters moved toward the exits, already calling their editors. Mercer pushed his way toward the side aisle, his face contorted with rage. As the piece reached its climax, combining Michael's live performance with his father's damning testimony, security personnel moved to intercept Mercer. But in the ensuing confusion, he managed to slip away through a service entrance. Later that evening, Jessica rested in the secure room Bellini had arranged at his restaurant, with Eleanor beside her. Michael, Sophia, and Robert joined them, the adrenaline of the evening slowly giving way to exhaustion. "You did it," Jessica said proudly, squeezing Michael's hand. "Dad would be so proud." "Mercer escaped," Michael replied, the victory feeling incomplete. "But he can't hide from this," Robert assured him. "The evidence is public now. Your father's voice has finally been heard." As they discussed next steps, Michael's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. He opened it to find a photograph of flowers being delivered to the hospital, with a message that chilled him to the core. The morning of the concert, Michael receives an anonymous message with only 5 words. He knows it's a trap, followed by a recent photo of Eleanor being watched by an unidentified man in her hospital room. Michael stared at the message on his phone, his blood turning to ice. The photo showed Eleanor in her hospital room sleeping peacefully, while a shadowy figure lurked just outside her door. The timestamp indicated it had been taken just 3 hours ago. He knows it's a trap. Michael showed the phone to Bellini, whose expression hardened. "This changes everything," the restaurant owner said, taking the device and studying the image carefully. "We need to rethink our approach." "I can't back down now," Michael insisted, his voice low so Jessica couldn't hear from across the room. "We're too close." Bellini nodded grimly. "Then we adapt. Mercer has inverted the game. Instead of walking into our trap, he's setting one of his own." Within an hour, Bellini had gathered everyone in his restaurant's private dining room. Michael, Sophia, Robert, and two men Michael hadn't met before, introduced only as security consultants. Maps of the exclusive mountaintop venue were spread across the table, alongside dossiers on known associates of Victor Mercer. "The invitation is clearly bait," Robert said, pointing to the event details on Michael's phone. "This exclusive private performance at Mercer's estate is designed to isolate you." One of the security consultants, a former policeman named Torres, traced his finger along the winding road leading to Mercer's property. "Single access point, remote location, spotty cell service, perfect for making someone disappear." "So I don't go," Michael suggested. "No," Sophia interjected, surprising everyone. "You have to go, but not alone and not unprotected." Bellini nodded in agreement. "Mercer expects you to either decline, proving you're afraid, or accept and walk right into his hands. We need to create a third option." For the next 2 hours, they formulated a plan. Michael would accept the invitation, but with several covert protections in place. Torres demonstrated a small listening device that could be hidden in Michael's lapel pin, the same treble clef pin that had belonged to his father. "This will transmit everything within a 20-foot radius," Torres explained. "We'll hear whatever happens in real time." "And I'll be inside too," Sophia added, causing Michael to look up sharply. "They're hiring extra serving staff for the event. I've already arranged to be placed on the catering team." "Absolutely not," Michael protested. "It's too dangerous." Sophia's expression was unyielding. "I'm trained in martial arts, speak 3 languages, and no one there knows my connection to you. I'm the perfect infiltrator." "She's right," Bellini confirmed. "And my men will be positioned around the property perimeter, ready to intervene if necessary." Robert unfolded a detailed blueprint of Mercer's mansion. "His private office is likely here, on the 2nd floor. If there's additional documentation about the fraud scheme, that's where it would be." As dawn approached, the plan was finalized. Michael returned to the hospital to check on Jessica, whose doctors had deemed her stable enough to return to her regular room. Extra security remained in place, disguised as hospital staff, ensuring her safety. "You look exhausted," Jessica commented when Michael entered, looking up from her book. "Long night of planning," he admitted, taking the chair beside her bed. "For the big confrontation?" she asked, showing perception beyond her years. When Michael raised an eyebrow, she smiled. "Eleanor told me everything. I'm not a child, Michael." "I know," he sighed. "I've just spent so long trying to protect you." "Maybe it's time we protected each other," she suggested. "I can't fight physically, but I can be your eyes and ears here. If anyone suspicious comes around, I'll alert Bellini's people immediately." Michael felt a swell of pride at his sister's courage. "When did you get so brave?" "I learned from my big brother," she replied with a smile. The day of the private performance arrived with unseasonable clouds gathering over the city. Michael spent the morning practicing, not only the pieces he would perform, but also reviewing the signals and code words he would use to communicate with Sophia and Bellini's team. At 4 o'clock, a sleek black car arrived to transport him to Mercer's estate. Michael wore the suit Bellini had given him, now properly tailored, with his father's treble clef pin affixed to the lapel, the pin that now contained the miniature transmitter. The journey to Mercer's mountaintop mansion took nearly an hour, the car winding up increasingly exclusive roads until it passed through an imposing gate flanked by security cameras. The estate sprawled across manicured grounds, the main house a modernist structure of glass and stone perched at the edge of a cliff, overlooking the distant city. As Michael exited the car, he scanned the area, noting positions where Bellini's men might be concealed in the surrounding woods. A butler greeted him at the entrance, leading him through a soaring atrium into a large room where a Steinway grand piano dominated a small stage. About 30 guests mingled in elegant evening wear, sipping champagne and engaging in refined conversation. Michael recognized several figures from the music industry: critics, producers, wealthy patrons. This was no hastily arranged trap. Mercer had assembled a legitimate audience to witness whatever he had planned. "Mr. Rivers," came a cultured voice from behind him. Michael turned to find himself face to face with Victor Mercer. In person, Mercer was taller than Michael had expected, with a full head of white hair and penetrating blue eyes that betrayed no hint of malice. Dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, he extended his hand with the confidence of a man accustomed to power. "Mr. Mercer," Michael acknowledged, accepting the handshake while maintaining eye contact. "Thank you for the invitation. I've been following your emerging career with interest," Mercer said smoothly. "Such talent should be properly showcased, don't you agree?" The double meaning in his words was unmistakable. Before Michael could respond, Mercer gestured toward the gathering. "Please mingle. Your performance will begin in 30 minutes. As Mercer moved away to greet other guests, Michael circulated through the room, hyper-aware of every exit, every security guard positioned discreetly along the walls. He spotted Sophia among the catering staff, her hair tucked beneath a cap, expertly balancing a tray of champagne flutes. Their eyes met briefly, then both looked away. When it was time to perform, Michael took his place at the piano. The room quieted as Mercer introduced him with practiced charm, speaking of discovering new talent and continuing the great traditions of music. The irony was not lost on Michael. He began with Chopin, the familiar notes centering him, allowing him to observe the room while appearing fully immersed in the music. Mercer watched from the front row, his expression appreciative but calculating. Halfway through the program, Michael transitioned to his father's composition. The same coded piece he had performed at the benefit concert, but without the recorded testimony. As the first distinctive phrases filled the room, Michael noticed Mercer's expression shift subtly, recognition and concern flashing across his features. The older man made a nearly imperceptible gesture to a security guard positioned near the door. Michael completed the performance to enthusiastic applause, taking a modest bow before stepping away from the piano. As the guests returned to their conversations, Mercer approached him. "Remarkable performance," he said, placing a hand on Michael's shoulder. "Perhaps you'd join me in my study for a more private conversation? I have a proposal that might interest you." "I'd be honored," Michael replied, knowing this was precisely what they had anticipated. Mercer's private study was located on the second floor, exactly where Robert had predicted. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of the valley below, now disappearing into twilight. Bookshelves lined the walls, and a large desk dominated the space. "Your father was talented too," Mercer said without preamble, moving to a sidebar to pour 2 glasses of whiskey, though he lacked certain pragmatic qualities. "Such as?" Michael asked, accepting the offered glass but not drinking. "Understanding how the industry truly works," Mercer replied, settling into a leather chair and gesturing for Michael to do the same. "Music is art, certainly, but it's also business. Your father never grasped that reality." "He seemed to grasp that you were stealing compositions from struggling artists," Michael said evenly. Mercer's expression didn't change. "Is that what Eleanor Wright told you?" "The old woman has always had a flair for the dramatic." "He left evidence," Michael continued. "Detailed records of the thefts, original recordings, names, dates. And yet here I am," Mercer spread his hands. "Still respected, still powerful. Do you know why?" He leaned forward. "Because the world doesn't care about your evidence. People want their comfortable illusions, their musical heroes." "You arranged my parents' accident," Michael said, the accusation hanging in the air between them. Mercer didn't deny it. "Your father discovered a pattern of intellectual redistribution that had been functioning successfully for decades. He threatened to expose everything, which would have destroyed careers, legacies, institutions. Certain sacrifices were regrettably necessary. Sacrifices? Michael's voice hardened. They were people. My parents. Collateral damage in a larger cultural equation, Mercer replied dismissively. Now about your future. The door opened unexpectedly, and Sophia entered with a tray of drinks. Refreshments, sir? She asked in a flawless French accent. Mercer frowned at the interruption. I didn't call for... The hostess insisted, Sophia continued smoothly, moving into the room and setting down the tray. The momentary distraction allowed Michael to scan the desk behind Mercer, noting a folder marked Stellar Archives prominently displayed. Fine. Mercer waved her away impatiently. Now, Mr. Rivers, tragic accidents continue to happen, particularly to those who disturb established systems. His tone had shifted from cultured to threatening. Your sister's recent infection, for instance. His words were interrupted by the sudden awareness of the microphone pin on Michael's lapel. Mercer's eyes narrowed as he reached forward and tore it away. You foolish boy, he hissed, crushing the device under his shoe. Did you really think... The study door burst open as two security guards rushed in, responding to Mercer's evident alarm. In the same moment, shouts and crashes could be heard from the floor below. Sir, we have intruders on the property, one guard reported urgently. Mercer rose, face contorted with rage. Take care of him, he ordered, moving swiftly toward a concealed door behind his desk. As the guards advanced, Sophia dropped her serving tray and executed a precise strike that sent one man staggering backward. The momentary confusion allowed Michael to lunge for the Stellar Archives folder on Mercer's desk, securing it as Bellini's men crashed into the room from the main entrance. In the chaos that followed, Mercer escaped through the hidden exit. But Michael and Sophia managed to fight their way downstairs and out to the waiting extraction vehicle. The crucial documentation clutched tightly in Michael's hand. We've got what we came for, Michael gasped as the car sped down the mountain road. Let's get back to Jessica. At the hospital, they found the corridor to Jessica's floor strangely quiet. The nurse at the station looked up with concern as Michael approached. Mr. Rivers, thank goodness you're here. Your sister was fine until she received a bouquet of flowers 2 hours ago, she explained, showing him the card left with the flowers. Promises are meant to be kept, and this is just the beginning. Michael stood frozen, the card trembling in his hands as he read the threat over and over. Around him, doctors and nurses rushed in and out of Jessica's room, the urgency in their movements confirming his worst fears. His sister's sudden relapse wasn't coincidental. It was deliberate retaliation. Toxic agent in the flowers, Dr. Martinez explained, her face drawn with concern as she approached him. We've identified it as a rare plant compound, likely absorbed through skin contact or inhalation. It's particularly dangerous for someone with an already compromised immune system. Michael leaned against the wall for support. Will she be okay? We're administering the antidote now. The next 24 hours will be critical. Dr. Martinez placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. Someone knew exactly what they were doing, Michael. This wasn't a random act. Bellini arrived moments later with the two detectives who had been investigating the threats. They took the card into evidence, their expressions grim as they photographed the flowers, now sealed in plastic bags. Hospital security footage shows a delivery person we can't identify, one detective explained. Professional job, face obscured, generic uniform. Michael found himself caught in an impossible situation, torn between staying at Jessica's bedside and pursuing Mercer before he could cause further harm. The documents they'd recovered from the mansion revealed even more than they'd anticipated. Not just evidence of musical theft, but a pattern of intimidation stretching back decades. Other accidents had befallen musicians who threatened to expose the truth. You need to rest, Sophia urged, bringing him coffee as dawn broke. She'd remained at the hospital all night, alternating between supporting Michael and helping Bellini coordinate security. "You can't protect Jessica if you collapse." Michael shook his head, his eyes never leaving his sister's pale face. The machines monitoring her vital signs beeped with mechanical precision, each sound a reminder of her fragility. "I can't rest until she's safe," he replied. "And she won't be safe until Mercer is stopped." Eleanor's condition had also worsened overnight, the stress of recent events taking a toll on her already fragile health. With both Jessica and Eleanor in critical condition, Michael felt the weight of responsibility crushing him. They were vulnerable because of him, because he had pursued the truth. By mid-morning, Bellini had transformed a hospital conference room into an impromptu command center. Maps, documents, and photographs covered the walls as Michael, Sophia, and Robert analyzed the evidence recovered from Mercer's estate. "These records show at least 7 other accidents arranged over the past 30 years, Robert said, examining a ledger of suspiciously consistent payments to a shell company. Hit and runs, equipment failures, apparent suicides, all involving people who threatened Mercer's operation. "The authorities won't move quickly enough," Bellini observed, closing his phone after yet another frustrating conversation with police officials. "Mercer has too many connections, too much influence. They're treating our evidence as allegations requiring thorough investigation, which could take months." Michael paced the small room, frustration building. "We don't have months. Jessica doesn't have months." "What if we go public with everything?" Sophia suggested. "Release all the evidence to the media simultaneously?" "Too risky," Bellini countered. "Mercer would simply deny everything, and the story would become one voice against another. The respected industry veteran versus the unproven young musician with a personal vendetta." A nurse interrupted their discussion, bringing unexpected news. Jessica had awakened briefly and was asking for Michael. He rushed to her room, finding her conscious but weak, her complexion alarmingly ashen. "You look terrible," she whispered, attempting a smile. "Look who's talking," he replied, gently taking her hand. "Eleanor told me." "What happened?" Jessica's voice was barely audible. "The flowers. Not an accident." Michael nodded, unsure how much to share. "Don't stop," Jessica continued, each word clearly an effort. "Finish what Dad started." Her eyes closed again, exhaustion reclaiming her. But her message strengthened Michael's resolve. When he returned to the conference room, his expression had hardened with determination. "We need to end this," he announced. "Now." That afternoon, Dr. Martinez delivered cautiously optimistic news. The antidote was working, Jessica's vital signs stabilizing. "She's responding to treatment," the doctor explained. "But her system has been severely taxed. Recovery will take time." While this development brought some relief, Eleanor's condition continued to deteriorate. During a brief moment of lucidity, she asked to speak with Michael alone. "In my old apartment," she whispered, her voice threadbare. "There's a box hidden under a loose floorboard in the bedroom closet. You need what's inside." Michael hesitated to leave the hospital, but Eleanor's insistence convinced him of the importance of her request. With Sophia accompanying him and Bellini's security ensuring Jessica remained protected, Michael set out to find Eleanor's former residence. The apartment building stood in a once respectable neighborhood now sliding into disrepair. The superintendent, recognizing Eleanor's name, allowed them access to her former unit, which had remained vacant since her eviction 3 years earlier. "Nobody wants it," he explained gruffly. "Too many leaks, too much mold. Building scheduled for demolition next year." The small apartment bore ghostly traces of Eleanor's former life. Faded rectangles on walls where paintings had hung, scratch marks on the floor from furniture long since sold or seized. In the bedroom closet, Michael quickly located the loose floorboard, revealing a metal box beneath. "She kept this hidden even when she lost everything else," Michael observed, carefully lifting the box. Inside, they found Eleanor's most precious possessions: old photographs, letters from notable musicians, and most importantly, a small cassette tape labeled Original Recording Session, Rivers Composition, and a detailed journal documenting years of observations about Stellar Records' fraudulent practices. "This is exactly what we need," Sophia said, examining the journal. "It's not just her word against Mercer's. She has dates, witnesses, specific instances, and this tape must contain your father's original compositions before they were stolen." They returned to the hospital to find authorities finally responding with appropriate urgency. The detective in charge, a seasoned investigator named Ramirez, reviewed the evidence they'd gathered. "This is compelling," she admitted, "especially combined with the attack on your sister. We can move on Mercer now, but he's likely already fled. His estate was empty when officers arrived to question him." "He won't have gone far," Michael insisted. "His entire identity is built around his position in the music world. He'll want to maintain appearances while arranging his escape." The combination of Eleanor's meticulous documentation, the evidence from Mercer's office, and the obvious attack on Jessica finally convinced the authorities to act. Arrest warrants were issued, accounts frozen, and a search launched for Victor Mercer. That evening, as Michael sat between the hospital beds of Jessica and Eleanor, Bellini arrived with an unexpected suggestion. "The benefit concert you organized was such a success that people are asking for an encore performance," he explained. "What if we use this moment, while the authorities are searching for Mercer, to draw him out?" "How?" Michael asked, intrigued despite his exhaustion. "Announce a special memorial concert dedicated to your parents, featuring newly discovered original compositions by your father. If Mercer believes you're going to publicly perform the evidence against him, his ego won't allow him to stay away. He'll want to stop it personally." The plan took shape quickly. Robert used his industry contacts to arrange venue and publicity, while Sophia worked with Michael to prepare a program that would incorporate his father's actual compositions alongside pieces that musically encoded the evidence against Mercer. "It's dangerous," Dr. Martinez cautioned when Michael explained their strategy. "But Jessica is stable enough now that you can focus on ending this threat once and for all." With the concert announced and tickets selling rapidly, Michael divided his time between hospital visits, rehearsals, and consultations with the authorities. The date was set for 1 week later, enough time for Jessica to continue recovering while maintaining momentum in the investigation. The night before the concert, Michael visited Jessica, whose condition had improved significantly. She sat propped up in bed, her color better, her eyes clearer. "I'll be listening via livestream tomorrow," she told him. "Eleanor too, if she's strong enough." Michael nodded, trying to project confidence despite his anxiety. "Once this is over, we can focus entirely on your recovery." "And your future at Juilliard," Jessica reminded him. "Don't forget why we started this journey." After leaving Jessica's room, Michael went to the hospital's small chapel, seeking a moment of quiet before tomorrow's confrontation. The space was empty, the silence a balm to his overtaxed mind. He sat in the dim light, running through the plan once more in his thoughts. The authorities would be positioned throughout the concert hall. Bellini's security would provide additional protection. Every entrance and exit would be monitored. If Mercer appeared, they would be ready. Michael returned to Eleanor's room for a final visit before heading home to rest. He found her awake, surprisingly alert, despite her declining physical state. "You've become the musician your father always believed you could be," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in days. "Tomorrow you'll finish what he started." "We'll finish it," Michael corrected her. "Together." Eleanor smiled, reaching for his hand. "Wear your father's pin tomorrow, for luck." "I will," he promised, squeezing her fingers gently. As he left the hospital in the early morning hours, a text message appeared on his phone. The screen displayed 5 simple words, accompanied by a photo that made his blood run cold. He knows it's a trap. Followed by a recent image of Eleanor being watched by an unidentified man in her hospital room. Michael's heart hammered in his chest as he stared at the photo on his phone. The shadowy figure watching Eleanor wasn't just any observer. The distinctive silhouette suggested someone professional, someone hired. He immediately dialed the hospital's security desk. "This is Michael Rivers. My elderly friend Eleanor Wright needs immediate protection," he said urgently. "Room 415. Someone's watching her." After confirming security would check on Eleanor, Michael called Bellini. "They've flipped the script," Michael explained, his voice tight with tension. "Mercer isn't planning to fall into our trap. He's setting his own." Within 20 minutes, Michael was back at the hospital, where Bellini waited with Torres and another security consultant. They huddled in a small conference room, the photo from Michael's phone projected onto a tablet. "Mercer has infiltrated the hospital staff," Torres concluded, pointing to the uniform visible in the shadowy image. "And likely the concert venue as well." "We need to change our entire approach," Bellini said, spreading the concert hall schematics across the table. "Mercer expects us to try catching him during the performance. Instead, he plans to use the public event to eliminate all the threats at once. You, Eleanor, possibly even Jessica." Michael ran his hands through his hair, fear and rage battling within him. "We can't cancel. That's exactly what he wants, to silence us permanently." "Then we change the game," Torres suggested. "If he expects you to be hunter, be prey instead. If he expects defense, attack." Their planning continued until dawn, when Sophia arrived with Robert. The 6 of them restructured their entire strategy, identifying likely infiltration points and developing countermeasures. Bellini's contacts yielded information that 3 new employees had been added to the concert hall staff within the last 24 hours. "We'll have our people watching his people," Bellini assured Michael, "and I've arranged extra protection for Jessica and Eleanor here at the hospital." Michael nodded, exhaustion evident in the shadows beneath his eyes. "I need to see Eleanor before the concert." He found her awake in her room, looking frailer than ever yet, somehow more determined. 2 of Bellini's security personnel, posing as hospital volunteers, sat reading nearby. "You discovered their surveillance," Eleanor said as Michael took the chair beside her bed. "How did you know?" She smiled weakly. "Because you have that same look your father had when he realized what he was up against. Determination mixed with fear. Not for yourself, but for those you love." Michael leaned closer, taking her papery hand in his. "I don't know if I can finish this, Eleanor. The risk is too great." "You will finish what your father started today," Eleanor said with surprising firmness, reaching to her bedside table. She pressed her treasured treble clef pin into his palm. "Wear this, for luck." Michael looked down at the small golden brooch with its tiny pearl accent. "I can't take this." "It belonged to your father before me," Eleanor insisted. "He wore it for every performance. Now it's yours." Hours later, Michael stood in the wings of the concert hall, the pin secured to his lapel. Through the curtain, he could see the auditorium filling rapidly. Local news cameras had been positioned for the live broadcast that would allow Jessica and Eleanor to watch from the hospital. Sophia approached, her violin case in hand. "Security spotted 2 of Mercer's men near the back entrance," she whispered. "They're being watched." Michael nodded, scanning the gathering crowd. "And Mercer?" "Not yet, but he'll come. His ego won't allow him to stay away." As the house lights dimmed and the audience settled, Michael took a deep breath. The concert began with performances by several of his Juilliard colleagues, a gesture of solidarity that had moved him deeply when they volunteered. From his position off stage, Michael could monitor both the performance and the audience. Midway through the program, he spotted him. Victor Mercer, seated confidently in the first row, as if attending any normal concert. The audacity of his presence sent a surge of cold anger through Michael's veins. Backstage, Bellini confirmed through his earpiece that his security team had identified Mercer's accomplices scattered throughout the venue. "They're in position for something," he murmured. "Stay alert." When it was finally time for Michael's performance, he walked onto the stage with deliberate calm. The applause washed over him as he took his seat at the piano, adjusting the microphone that had been positioned nearby. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began. "This concert holds special significance, as it's dedicated to the memory of my parents, James and Maria Rivers, whose lives were cut short 7 years ago." His eyes found Mercer in the front row, the older man's expression one of cultured appreciation, masking something predatory beneath. "Music has the power to tell truths when words fail," Michael continued. "Tonight, I'd like to share a piece my father was working on before his death, a composition that, like him, was silenced too soon." Michael began to play, the familiar notes centering him despite the tension thrumming through his body. He had chosen to begin with the exact melody his father had encoded, with evidence against Mercer, a direct message to the man watching from the front row. As the music built, Michael noticed subtle movement throughout the auditorium. Mercer's men were repositioning, preparing for whatever signal their boss would give. Simultaneously, Bellini's security personnel adjusted their positions in response. Halfway through the piece, Michael nodded almost imperceptibly toward the sound booth. As planned, the technician activated the hidden speakers, and the recorded voice of Michael's father filled the concert hall. "I, James Rivers, make this testimony against Victor Mercer and Stellar Records regarding systematic theft of intellectual property and the threats made against those who discovered this practice." Gasps rippled through the audience. Mercer's face contorted with fury as he rose from his seat, making a sharp gesture toward his men. But before they could act, Bellini's team moved swiftly, intercepting them at every point. Michael continued playing, adding his own musical voice to his father's recorded testimony. On the large screen behind him, documents from Eleanor's collection appeared, evidence of decades of theft, fraud, and intimidation. The audience watched in stunned silence as the story unfolded through music and evidence. Reporters rushed to phone their editors. Concert-goers recorded with their phones. The live stream ensured that thousands more, including Jessica in her hospital bed, witnessed everything. Mercer, realizing his men had been neutralized, began moving toward a side exit. Michael, seeing this, deviated from the plan. He stopped playing abruptly and spoke directly into the microphone. "Victor Mercer, you arranged the murder of my parents because my father discovered your crimes. You poisoned my sister as a warning. You threatened an elderly woman who only wanted justice. Where are you going? The truth is finally being heard." The spotlight swung to illuminate Mercer in the side aisle. Security personnel moved to block his exit as Detective Ramirez approached him with evident satisfaction. "Victor Mercer, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, attempted murder, and 2 counts of homicide in the deaths of James and Maria Rivers." As Mercer was led away in handcuffs, his face a mask of impotent rage, Michael returned to the piano. His fingers found the keys for the final movement of his father's composition, the resolution that James Rivers had never lived to write, but which his son had completed. The music rose and swelled, transformation of pain into something transcendent, loss into legacy. When the final notes faded, the audience rose in a standing ovation that seemed to lift the very roof. 3 months later, Michael stood in a courthouse corridor, arm around Jessica, whose strength had returned along with wisps of her hair. Eleanor sat in a wheelchair beside them, frail but present, as they waited for the verdict in Mercer's trial. The evidence had been overwhelming. Eleanor's meticulous documentation, the records recovered from Mercer's mansion, testimony from others who had been threatened, and forensic proof linking Mercer to the accidents, arranged over decades. The attack on Jessica had been the final piece. The flowers had been traced to a specialized greenhouse owned by a Mercer subsidiary. When the jury returned with a guilty verdict on all counts, Michael felt a complex wave of emotions: vindication, grief, and finally, a sense of completion. In the months that followed, healing took many forms. Jessica's recovery progressed steadily, the cancer responding well to treatment without further setbacks. Michael balanced his studies at Juilliard with the development of the new Rivers Wright Music Foundation, created to support young musicians and provide music therapy for pediatric cancer patients. Eleanor, against all medical expectations, stabilized enough to serve as the foundation's honorary director, her expertise and connections proving invaluable despite her limited physical strength. On a bright spring afternoon, the foundation held its inaugural event in the garden courtyard of Memorial Hospital. Jessica, now strong enough to walk unassisted, helped organize young patients into a semicircle of chairs facing the small performance area. Michael and Sophia took their positions at piano and violin, the musical connection between them having deepened into something more personal over their shared ordeal. Eleanor watched from her place of honor in the front row, her eyes bright with pride. "Today we celebrate the healing power of music," Michael announced to the gathered patients, families, and supporters, "and the legacy of those who believed that art can transform even our darkest experiences." As they began to play, Michael noticed the subtle swell beneath Sophia's flowing dress, evidence of the new life growing within her. They had shared the news with Eleanor and Jessica just last week, the joy in that private moment, a balancing of the universe's scales. When the concert concluded, Eleanor beckoned Michael closer, her voice a whisper meant only for him. "I found something among your father's things," she explained, handing him a small, wrapped package. "A composition he wrote for you to play on the day you had your first child. It seems he always knew this moment would come."